The government must stop paying dead people. Apparently, the government's been paying dead people. I've never heard about any of this. I guess I'll find out now.
Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with me today are two of my colleagues from my Senate office, Mr. John Lowry and Mr. Jackson Bewley. I am grateful for their good judgment, counsel, and advice.
So before we get into this, I'm assuming that what's been happening is that there's been Social Security payouts to people who have already passed away, which doesn't surprise me at all.
I'm delighted, Mr. President, to see so many members of Congress, and I mean this sincerely, so many members of Congress embrace the call for a less wasteful federal government, for a more efficient federal government. We spend a little over $6 trillion a year, as Senator Sanders so eloquently pointed out. When you spend $6 trillion a year, somebody's getting $6 trillion a year. Every penny in our budget has a constituency, and that constituency will fight us. They will fight us. And I recognize that, and it's something that as we go about downsizing government, we have to be mindful of. However, there is one constituency
downsize it all
that is not going to be able to fight us in our quest to scrutinize federal spending, and I'm referring to dead people.
Yeah,
and that's what I want to talk about today.
It's been a minute and 50 seconds, and you haven't said anything substantial yet.
I want to talk about dead people and the fact that they're getting money from the federal government.
They can't.
In fiscal year 2023 alone, this is just 1 year, our government sent $1.3 billion, not $1.3 million. We sent $1.3 billion in checks to dead people. Those aren't my numbers.
Christ.
Those numbers come from the Office of Management and Budget.
But if nobody cashes the checks, why does it matter if they sent the checks out? Who's cashing the checks? I need to know this. Who's cashing the checks?
That's just 1 year.
Let's see, 1.4 billion COVID stimulus payments to dead people, ridiculous. $2.9 trillion value of improper payments since 2004, so like 21 years of failure. 6.5 million is the number of 112-year-olds on Social Security. How many people are that old? How many Americans are over the age of 110? There are very few. 0.6 were super centurions. I guess that's what they call it. The highest absolute number of centurions in the world. Do I have to ask ChatGPT because you can't give me a straight up answer? Wait, what did it say here? It's projected more than quadruple over the next 3 decades. Estimated 101,000. 101,000 people are over the age of just 100. ChatGPT, please answer this next question. How many Americans are over the age of 110? You're gonna make me log in? Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh, why would he make me log in? Buddy, no. Buddy, no. We're logging in, guys. Same question, obviously. How many Americans are over the age of 110? I just want to know the answer to this question. Super centurions. There are only 20 to 40 verified super centurions. How much did it say we were paying them out? 6.5 million. 6.5 million. There's 20 of them in America. Obviously, this is a huge oversight. Jesus
Not
Christ.
only is the federal government sending checks to dead people, those checks are being cashed.
By who? My guy.
Now, I have heard, Mr. President, of dead people voting, but
No, I never heard of that.
cashing the checks, you don't have to be God's perfect idiot to realize that there's fraud happening
Absolutely.
with
we do
respect
that.
to
That's
all
why we're
this
here.
money. Here's how this problem arises. When you
People see
die
an opportunity
in
to
America,
steal money from the
your
government, and they
name-
take it because the government charges them too much money to be alive. So they think that they're entitled to the money because they already spend way too much of their money and they can't afford it paying the government for things that we don't need. And so it's kind of like a revolving door where the government's spending too much money, so people are frauding the government and taking money that the government is spending too much of, and then they're using that to compensate themselves for the money they have to pay for the government to spend too much money. So whenever the government goes in and they have all these tax cuts and all these things that are getting slashed, obviously it's going to make some kind of change. It's got to reduce our
is
liabilities
sent
here.
to the Vital Records Office in your state. And at that point, the Social Security Administration pays each state to get an ongoing list of deceased Americans in that state.
Why do
So
they have the Versace like logo in the back here? Is this something that's common? He's like Versace here in the Senate floor. Also, this guy needs to talk a little bit faster. I thought that there was like a time limit on these
Far.
kind of stuff.
so good. The Social Security Administration
Look at this guy. He is
takes
totally
this data,
checked out.
this list of deceased people, and they
This
compile.
guy doesn't give a shit. He's not listening to a single word of anything that's going on here at all. He's not listening to a single freaking word. Look at this guy. He doesn't give a fuck. He needs to get fired. He's the next one to go, guys. His salary is gone.
On an ongoing basis a list called the Death Master File. The Death Master File. That's just a list
That's a
of
badass
everybody
name for a
updated
band.
daily of people in the United States who are deceased. Why does the Social Security Administration do this? Well, so the SSA, Social Security Administration, can stop sending people who have died checks. So far, so good. There's just one problem.
Okay, pop off.
I discovered this about 7 years ago. The Social Security Administration refuses to share that list with anybody else in the federal government. They won't share it with
Why?
any other federal agencies,
I'm sure he'll tell us
many
why.
of which send out checks.
Why?
The Department of Treasury, for example, sends out checks. SSA won't share the information with them. The Small Business Administration sends out a lot of checks.
Is anybody surprised by
Social
this?
Security Administration
so.
has a list of all deceased Americans, but SSA will not share that information with the SBA. I'll give you some examples. You remember, Mr. President, when we were in the coronavirus crisis, we had an economic meltdown. We sent stimulus checks to Americans
Yeah, thanks for my
to try to
stimulus
keep
check,
the
by the
economy
way. Help
on
me
its
start my
feet.
business.
We paid $1.4 billion to dead people, and they cashed the checks.
Then who is cashing these checks and why aren't they in prison, dude? It's not that hard. You cash a check, it has to go into an account. Like, I guess you could go to like a check cashing place, but then don't you have to show your ID before they'll cash the check? Isn't that how that works? I don't know. Unsophisticated Pun, welcome to the channel. Thank you for the follow. We are about to discover a whole bunch of fraud. So you came in at the right time. So we're going to ask ChatGPT again. Do I need an ID to cash a check at a check cashing place? It wouldn't be surprising if they just say whatever. Yes, you typically need a government issued photo ID. Additional requirements like providing a social security number or fingerprint. So you're telling me that we know who's cashing these checks and we're doing nothing about it? Come on, dog.
The Paycheck Protection Program, which was a part of our stimulus program, paid out $38 million alone.
I know what he's here for now. He's the resident board keeper, the keeper of the board. He knows he's going to get fired. Look at his face. He knows. He knows his job's pointless and useless, and he doesn't need to be there.
To dead people. These were people who were using, live people, obviously, who were using dead people's Social Security numbers to collect payments. The COVID-19 Economic Disaster Injury Disaster Loan Fund, another culprit, was involved in sending checks to dead people. The Department of Veterans Affairs, and I'm not blaming them, in many respects it's not their fault. A couple of years ago, a scam artist stole the Social Security number of a deceased veteran, and received about $825,000 in checks.
Jesus.
From 1990.
What? You're telling me that I can just go out and like just take people's money like that? Like it's not even that hard? And he was getting $850,000, you guys. I want $850,000.
97 to 2024.
Spend it on ice cream and Taco
Now,
Bell.
the person committing this fraud was just quietly accepting the check.
Oh my goodness. Sketchy Dispensation 75. Thank you for the follow. The Hesitant Souvenir. Thank you for the follow. We're making substantial changes out here, but actually we're just watching YouTube. So come watch YouTube with us.
Checks. Somehow the Department of Veterans Affairs, and for some reason, stopped sending that person the checks. So the fraudster just picked up the phone and called the Department of Veterans Affairs. He impersonated the dead person and convinced them to start sending the checks again. Again, not necessarily the fault of the Department of Veterans Affairs.
I think they should probably have to confirm that before they send out checks again. So maybe just a little bit of accountability might go a long way here.
The VA didn't know that the Social Security number belonged to a deceased person. Another example, a person in Ohio was able to collect her deceased mother's Veterans Affairs benefits for 48 years. 48 years.
So when they get caught, do they have to pay the money back? Like, do they have to, like, be put on some kind of payment plan to give the money back? Or what happens to them? They go to jail?
Or she was caught. We don't. The truth is, Mr. President, it's sort of like saying, being asked, you didn't go fishing on Saturday. How many fish do you think you didn't catch? We don't know how much money we're sending out every year to dead people.
Why wouldn't we know that? Why? Oh, to specifically dead people, because we don't.
Let me give you an example of how screwed up the data is, Mr. President. This is a strong indicator of what's wrong. The Social Security Administration, if you ask them, will tell you that there are, according to their records, there are 6.5 million Americans living today in America who are 112 years of age or older.
Yeah, the real count is like 40.
They say there are 6.5 million Americans who are at least 112 years old or older. Now, I don't know about you, Mr. President, but I don't know anybody who's 112 years old.
Hell no.
And I checked, at any given time, There are about 40 people on an ongoing basis in the world
Thank you, ChatGPT.
who are fortunate enough to live to be 112. But the data is so screwed up that according to SSA, 6.5 million people are 112
It's off
years
just
old.
a little bit. It's just a little bit off, guys. It's fine. Everything's fine.
A number of years ago, 7 years ago, I started working with Senator Tom Carper, a fine American, if there ever was one. I started working with Tom on this issue. I went to Social Security, and I said, look, this problem is easily solved. Just share the death master file with other agencies, and especially share it with the Department of Treasury. I don't want to confuse anyone, but the Department of Treasury has a do not pay list of people who aren't supposed to receive checks for a variety of reasons that other agencies consult. But I said to my friends at Social Security, why don't you just give the death.
I'm really curious as like once all of these government agencies are forced to play nice, how efficient we really will be and what we're actually capable of, as well as what are going to be the consequences for doing these kinds of things. And will we be able to recoup some of the losses that we've received over the $3 trillion, for example, since 2004? It's kind of like whenever you realize that you got signed up for some kind of service that you didn't need, and then like 4 years go by, or in this case 20 something years go by, and then you like call them up and you're like, hey, I didn't sign up for this, and they give you like 2 months back. Like, I don't expect us to actually get our full value back as taxpayers from this fraud that's been going on, but like a couple years would be nice. And if you could just invest that into something that's useful for us as American citizens instead of sending it off in some foreign country for some foreign conflict or some foreign thing, when we have things we need to take care of here, then like that could actually start to make a significant impact if it's compounded over enough time.
Death master file to other agencies. They said we can't. It's illegal.
It's illegal.
The way we construe our enabling
What would
statutes,
be some kind of law that needs to be in place to make that illegal? Usually most of the laws that are created are to protect from bad things happening. What bad thing could possibly happen if you're just sharing some data between other governmental agencies, given you're protecting the information to some extent?
don't have the authority. Well, I said, okay, I'm not going to argue with them. We'll just go pass a law. It was harder than I thought, but we did. In 2020, Senator Carper and I passed a bill. The bill was called Stopping Improper Payments to Deceased People Act. And it gave the Social Security Administration permission, and indeed directed the Social Security Administration to start sharing its list of dead people with other agencies in the federal government. I don't want to get down in the weeds, but believe it or not, we had people oppose the legislation.
People cashing checks, maybe. People getting kickbacks, maybe.
And many people.
All of that's hearsay. I have no idea. Don't listen to me. I know literally nothing.
Within the federal government. So in order to get our bill passed, we had to compromise. We had to agree to only implement this requirement that Social Security share the list of dead people with everybody else. We could only get them to agree to do it for 3 years for a trial program. This clock started ticking on our 3-year period in December of 2023. So obviously, 3 years is right upon us, and if we don't make this program permanent, it's going to expire in 2000.
Did he like share some numbers of the amount of money that he's saved over these years? Because that would be a really good metric to save, to figure out exactly how much money we could be saving in the future, and then possibly make it permanent.
2026. So Senator Carper and I have introduced another bill. It does basically the same thing as the 2020 bill, but it makes the program permanent. This new bill is called Ending Improper Payments to Deceased People Act. And we need to pass it. There's been a lot of squabbling back and forth. I don't want to do anything to step on too many toes to jeopardize my bill, but
well, you're about to step on 6.5 million toes. So, yeah.
How much the states are going to be paid, and who's going to pay Social Security for sharing their dead person's list with the rest of the government. I think we have a lot of it worked out, but we need to go past this bill. I mean, this makes no sense whatsoever. I can understand if we talk about changing the Medicaid program, for example. What's fair, what's unfair. I can understand debating that, and I can understand reasonable people disagreeing over what changes, if any, we ought to make to the Medicaid program. I get it. I just listened to Senator Sanders once again speak very eloquently about the waste at the Department of Defense. That's something that reasonable people, all of whom agree that we ought to have a strong defense, but reasonable people can disagree over how to achieve that. But my God, you don't have to be Euclid to figure out that this is just fraud. It's abuse. It's low-hanging fruit, and it's so easily solved. All we have to do is direct the Social Security Administration on a permanent basis, not a three-year trial basis, on a permanent basis to start sharing the list of dead people with the Department of...
So there's basically this entire video is about sharing a list of dead people from the Social Security office to the rest of the government so they can stop paying our tax dollars to other places and people and things that don't need or deserve to have that money. And I guess we won't recoup any of the costs. And I don't believe he did state exactly how much money he saved with his 3 years of bills here.
Treasury and everybody else.
We've been paying dead people money and people have been cashing the checks. Who's been cashing the checks? Send them to jail or put them to work so they can recoup the costs. How about that? How about we take people who've committed fraud against the taxpayers and then force them to work the jobs that we're trying to cut that we need? Boom, there you go. Some might call it slave labor. Some might call it reparations for doing crime.
Else in federal government who wants it. And then everybody's on the same page, and we know who's deceased, and we can stop sending the money to dead people who cash the checks. Now, I'm talking about this now, Mr. President. I've talked about it before on the floor. I'm not going to try to pass the bill this year. I'm not. We're running up against the clock, and we have the NDAA. We have a CR to pass, and we've got to keep government open. We've got to renew the flood insurance program, and you know all that, Mr. President. But I'm going to be back. I'm like the Terminator. I will be back as soon as the new Congress is sworn in. Many of my colleagues have said to me, you know, it's time we stop talking about who needs to pay more in taxes and start talking about and asking the question with respect to what the hell happened to the money. And I agree with them. I can't think of an easier place to start. Let's just pass this simple bill. Let's stop sending money to dead people. Again,
let's keep sending money.
We can debate.
That'd be great.
About the wisdom of dead people voting. We all know what happens. But
look, I just want to say that I really appreciate this guy's ability to dissociate. Like, I've never in my life seen somebody dissociate so hard on probably. Let's see how many people have viewed this video. Senator John Kennedy 2 months ago 757,000 people have seen this guy dissociate harder than anyone's dissociated in their entire life, and I am so here for it. He is my spirit animal whenever people are talking about boring shit that doesn't matter. This seems to be like boring shit that does matter, so maybe he should be paying attention.
Cashing checks, that's a bridge too far. Thank you, Mr. President, for your time and attention. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Nice. That was pretty good, right? I mean, like, I didn't know that they were spending trillions of dollars on nonsense. Actually, I did. I just didn't know what specific nonsense it was. But I'm really happy that I know now what specific nonsense we've been spending money on. So maybe, if we're lucky, they'll stop sending checks to dead people, and alive people will stop cashing them. We'll see.